Doris stands at the stove, 24 years old, Birmingham, Alabama, a Saturday morning in 1957. The hot comb warms on the back burner. A borrowed dress hangs on the door. A ring box waits on the table beside a worn copy of the Green Book her cousin left just in case. 12 rules shaped this morning. Number 1 explains why love alone was never enough. Number 12, the hot comb before the veil. The comb sits on the burner, heating slow, the way it has to. Doris turns it once, checks the heat against a folded cloth. This is the way her mother taught her. This is not the wedding yet. This is hours before the wedding. The hiss against damp hair, the smell of hot metal and pomade, this is the part nobody photographs. By the 1950s, straightened hair carried real weight, a legacy traced back to Madam C.J. Walker and pushed further by chemist George E. Johnson. The rule was not written anywhere. It lived in glances from aunts, in the quiet expectation that a bride's hair would be done. Skip it, and the whispers started. Not cruel usually, just constant, tired-looking, unkept, on her own wedding day. The comb did not care how early she had to rise to beat the heat of the day. It only cared that the work got done. That was the rule. Nobody had to say it twice, and the hair was only the beginning. Number 11, the borrowed dress. The dress on the door was not bought off a rack downtown. It was fitted at this table, pinned by hand. In parts of the segregated South, bridal shops simply would not let a black woman try on a dress before buying it. Martha Tucker, denied entry in 1952, finally got to try on a wedding gown in 2024 at 94 years old. So the dress became something else. A pattern borrowed from a cousin, a hand-cranked sewing machine humming late into the night. The dress was not less beautiful for being homemade. It was proof that a family could build a wedding day out of refusal. Once the dress was settled, the next question was harder. Where would she even be allowed to wear it? Number 10, the photographer who wouldn't come. A car idled outside, borrowed for the morning, because the studio downtown served white clients only. This pattern pushed an entire parallel industry into being. Black-owned studios rose to serve customers the mainstream trade refused. Doris's cousin already knew a studio 2 neighborhoods over. The click of an old shutter happened somewhere chosen with care. The photograph framed on a mantle for 60 years was not decoration. It was evidence that had to be fought for. Finding somewhere to actually celebrate afterward turned out to be its own negotiation entirely. Number 9, the name she was finally allowed to use. A fountain pen scratched against a courthouse register. Mrs. Somebody, for the first time, written in permanent ink. In daily life, black women were often addressed by first name only. The title Mrs. carried a dignity that was not guaranteed elsewhere. The courthouse clerk wrote it without ceremony. The church would use it from the pulpit. The neighbors would use it at the market. The scratch of that pen meant something a white bride's identical signature never had to mean. The name was settled now. The bigger question was who, beyond these walls, would actually let her use it. Number 8, the reception hall search. Folding chairs scraped across a church basement floor. A borrowed punch bowl sat at the end of a long table. Hotel ballrooms downtown simply would not book black weddings. The Green Book existed because families needed halls that would welcome them. So families built their own version of elegant. A church basement, decorated with ribbons, a reception full of heart. It was full of heart. It was also a workaround, not a preference. Where to celebrate was settled. The wedding night was next. Number 7. The Green Book on the table. The same paperback sat folded on the kitchen table from the very first image. Dog-eared, soft at the spine, a gas station map tucked behind its back cover. The Negro Motorist Green Book listed beauty parlors, tourist homes, and hotels safe for black travelers because mainstream hotels and restaurants could refuse service outright, no explanation required. Historian Susan Rue's research documents a Nevada honeymoon in the 1950s where a new bride was turned away from lunch service entirely. Her husband, a war veteran who had survived a prisoner of war camp, denied something as small as a sandwich on his honeymoon. A guidebook meant for safety became required honeymoon planning. Not an accessory, a prerequisite. The trip could be mapped around danger. The wedding itself still had to satisfy people who were never even invited. Until now, every rule lived in a mirror. A borrowed dress, a hand-built reception. What came next lives somewhere else entirely. Number 6. The church mother's inspection. Stiff pew wood. The rustle of paper fans moving in slow rhythm. Doris adjusting her neckline before she walked past the 3rd row, where the church mothers sat. Historian Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham's research on Black Baptist church culture documents what scholars call the politics of respectability, a set of standards around dress, posture, and conduct enforced largely by senior laywomen, women everyone called church mothers or deaconesses, not written down, not posted anywhere, understood completely. A neckline cut wrong, a laugh too loud at the reception, a glance held too long with someone other than the groom. Any of it could be talked about for years, long after the cake was gone. This is where the rules stopped living in mirrors and started living in judgment that followed a woman for decades. The early rules could embarrass her for an afternoon. What came next could follow her into a bank, a job, a home she hadn't found yet. Number 5, the form that needed his signature. Fluorescent light buzzed over the bank counter. A rubber stamp thudded down on a form Doris and her husband filled out together days after the wedding. Before 1974 and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, married women across the country, regardless of race, often could not open credit in their own name. A husband's signature was standard, sometimes required outright. For Black applicants, this baseline barrier often sat on top of separate, well-documented patterns of lending discrimination from banks reluctant to extend credit to Black households at all. The teller slid the form back across the counter. His name went first. His signature carried the weight. Hers sat beside it, present but not load-bearing. The form looked neutral. It was not. It was a gate, and the gate opened only one way. Marriage was supposed to mean partnership. On paper, it often meant her financial identity quietly folded into his. Money was one wall. Where they'd actually be allowed to live turned out to be another. Number 4. The neighborhood that said no. A realtor's clipboard. A sold sign turned the wrong way on a lawn just outside the boundary they were supposed to stay within. Redlining shaped American housing markets for decades. A documented pattern where lenders and realtors steered Black families away from entire neighborhoods, regardless of income or credit. It would take until 1968 and the Fair Housing Act for the law to formally catch up to what families like Doris's had navigated for years already. The homes that would sell to them clustered in the same few streets, often priced higher than comparable homes elsewhere, for buyers with fewer comparable options. The wedding had promised a new household. The housing market quietly decided where that household could actually exist and where it could not. The home was its own battle. The job she'd keep, or lose, simply for marrying, turned out to be the next one. Number 3. The job she had to leave. A desk being cleared. A nameplate lifted off and set in a drawer for the last time. Marriage bars, documented in research associated with economist Claudia Golden, shaped teaching and clerical employment for decades, with some school boards and employers requiring women to resign upon marriage, treating a wedding ring as incompatible with continued work. For Black women, who were already concentrated in domestic and service roles with little job security to begin with, this rule could land even harder. A coworker mentioned it quietly, almost apologetically. The school board's policy. Nothing personal. Just policy. The job was real. The training behind it was real. The income mattered more now than it ever had, with a new household to build. None of that mattered to the policy. Marriage, the supposed reward, could cost her the very thing she'd worked years to earn. This is the number that explains why the rest of this list existed at all. Number 2. The announcement that never ran. Scissors on a kitchen table. Newsprint ink on fingertips. Doris's mother clipping the wedding announcement. Carefully. The way she'd clip something precious. It did not run in the local paper downtown. That paper, like most mainstream papers of the era, reserved its society pages for white couples only. The announcement ran instead in the Black press, in publications like Ebony, founded by the Johnson Publishing Company in 1945, specifically to cover the lives, achievements, and celebrations that mainstream papers ignored. Her mother did not paste the clipping into a scrapbook with resignation. She pasted it with pride. This was the record that mattered. This was the one that would last. Exclusion from one institution did not erase the marriage. It simply proved that an entire separate institution had been built, by necessity, to hold what the first one refused to print. One number remains. It is the one that explains every rule that came before it. Number 1. The wedding as proof. Doris stands at the same kitchen table from the very beginning. The hot comb has cooled now. The dress is on. The ring sits where the box used to be. The green book is folded into her handbag for the drive ahead. Look at everything that had to happen just to get here. Hours of hair work before anyone saw her face. A dress built at home because a shop wouldn't let her try one on. A photographer found 2 neighborhoods away. A reception hall built from folding chairs and borrowed linen. A travel guide required for safety on a honeymoon. A neckline checked by women who meant well and watched closely anyway. A bank form that needed his signature more than hers. A neighborhood that decided where they could live before they'd even asked. A job that might not survive the marriage that was supposed to crown it. An announcement that had to find its own newspaper to run in. None of that was random. Historian Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham's research on the politics of respectability offers the through line. Dress, conduct, presentation, all of it functioned as armor and argument at once. A way of proving worth to a world that withheld it by default. A white bride in the same year walked into a dress shop, tried on a gown, got married, signed a bank form, and moved into a neighborhood, and none of it required proof. It was simply assumed. Doris's version of that same Saturday required 12 quiet negotiations just to reach the same starting line. The wedding day was never only a celebration. It was evidence, submitted to a system that demanded it, on a day when love alone was never going to be treated as enough. That was the real tradition. Nobody had to write it down. Everybody already knew. Doris picks up her handbag. The green book goes in beside the ring box. The same kitchen table that held a hot comb and a borrowed dress now holds nothing at all, because everything on it finally has somewhere to be. If your family kept a story like this, a dress sewn at a kitchen table, a name only used after the wedding, a guidebook tucked into a glove box, tell us below. Subscribe and come with us to the next forgotten rule history left out of the photograph.